Remembering those killed in the Christchurch massacre, the New Zealand government moves to speed up the return of the victims' bodies. The call for tougher gun laws. A major New Zealand gun retailer has confirmed it sold 4 weapons to the accused gunmen. Keeping worshippers safe. Australia's multi-million-dollar move to protect mosques, churches, synagogues and religious schools. And scores killed and tourists trapped after flooding and landslides in Indonesia.
This is SBS World News with Darren Mara.
Good evening. Senior figures in New Zealand's Muslim community are discussing whether to have a national memorial burial for victims of the Christchurch massacres. But ultimately, it may be up to the families as they await the return of the bodies of the 50 people killed in the terror attack. In other developments today, the New Zealand government says all bodies will be returned to families later this week. The accused plans to represent himself in court, and a major New Zealand gun retailer confirms it sold 4 weapons to the accused. Well, Ricardo Gonçalves joins us now from Christchurch. Ricardo, it's now 3 days since the massacre at the mosques. How is the city coping with such trauma?
Well, Darren, we've been here in Christchurch for 3 days now, watching memorial sites like this one build and witnessing the different stages of grief that many people are going through. Many are sad, some are angry, but most are remaining defiant, offering love and support. From schools across Christchurch, they came. More than 1,000 students converging at a park near the Al Noor Mosque, answering a Facebook call to unite.
Let's not forget what happened. 50 lives were lost. 50 lives of our brothers and sisters.
They lit candles, passing the flame to one another to symbolise the sharing of love. This vigil was organised by the head boy of Kashmir High School. It's the same school from which 2 students and a former student were killed.
We're about uniting for love and peace, and that's what I want to share. You know, having that positive mindset. We want to starve the killer. You know, we don't want to give him attention because that's what he wants. You know, we want to come together and just show that, you know, we're behind everyone, and whoever needs support, we're there for them.
The 2 killed from Kashmir High School were Year 10 student Sayed Milm and Year 12 student Hamza Mustafa. His father, Khalid, also died in the attack. The first bodies were released back to their families last night. It's Islamic custom to bury the dead within 24 hours, but that has not been possible.
All the care is being taken to make sure the members who are left behind, the family members, they are taken in full confidence in making sure that the last rites are done as per their wishes, which will satisfy them and which will give them some peace.
Authorities hope to have all the bodies released by Wednesday, paving the way for funerals to finally begin. A volunteer group of Australian Muslims have travelled to Christchurch to help prepare the bodies in line with Islamic protocols.
It's not just a Muslim thing. It happened to Christchurch, it happened to everybody. So we just felt like we wanted to do something to help because it's so close, you know, just across the water. It's not a big deal to come here.
Irrespective of background, religion, race, creed, I think because New Zealand's so close to us, you know, I think it's a moral responsibility upon anyone that's somewhat human, you know, to assist in any way they can.
A makeshift crisis centre has been set up at Hagley College as the rest of the city returns to school and work. New Zealand has banded together in these 72 hours since the attack, with Muslim leaders promising their resolve has only been strengthened.
They have failed woefully because what they have done, if anything, has increased the love and the feeling we have for our own country.
And as floral tributes grow around the city, so does the strength of emotion.
You know, I'm a mother of 5 children. I'm so scared about where my children are going into, the next part of the generations to come.
An online fundraising page has raised more than $4.5 million while the mental health helpline had more than 500 contacts from around the country last night alone. The average length of those calls was 38 minutes.
We're expecting to have to provide additional support, especially over the next 6 to 8 weeks and then over the longer term.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern signed a condolence book alongside Governor-General Dame Patsy Reddy. Ms Ardern writing, "We are one, they are us." New Zealand's biggest gun retailer has confirmed that it sold 4 firearms to the accused gunman over a period of 12 months. None of them were semi-automatics, but this afternoon, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said the attack has exposed a weakness in the nation's gun laws and they will be reformed.
Jacinda Ardern is a Prime Minister of her word.
When Australia found itself tragically in a similar position to what we find ourselves now, they took 12 days to make their decision. We have taken 72 hours. I will be giving a more fulsome set of details once we've worked through the in-principle decision that Cabinet has made today.
A decision supported by all members of Cabinet.
This was a Cabinet decision, and that's the total answer.
The owner of Gun City, a chain store which bills itself as the world's largest gun store, has admitted his business sold 4 weapons and ammunition to Brenton Tarrant between December 2017 and March 2018.
He was a brand new purchaser with a brand new licence. It was an ordinary sale.
But confirming they did not sell Tarrant any military-style semi-automatic rifles.
Gun City did not sell him an MSSA, only A-category firearms.
Mr Tipple, who has been criticised for gun billboards featuring children, said he did not feel responsible for the shootings.
If we allow him to make changes in our ideology, in our behaviour, he's won.
There's an estimated 1.5 million firearms in New Zealand. That's about 1 firearm for every 3 citizens. The minimum age to own a gun is 16 or 18 for semi-automatic military-style weapons. A licence must be obtained, but most firearms don't have to be registered. New Zealand has made several recent attempts to modify gun laws, with the latest in 2017. But there has been no significant change in 26 years. Even this shooting enthusiast recognises checks are often insufficient.
Got a firearms licence, so if I wanted to go and buy an AR or an AK-47, yes, I could go and buy it now.
The coalition of licensed firearm owners, however, cautioning against change for change's sake.
We do not want any knee-jerk, reactive legislation that doesn't actually affect the ability for a person to commit these sort of crimes. We have to stop that from happening again.
Brenton Tarrant was charged with 1 count of murder on Saturday and is due back in court on April 5, where police say he is likely to face more charges. Tarrant has confirmed he doesn't want a lawyer and plans to represent himself in court. In Christchurch, Laurie Lawira, SBS World News.
The Australian government says it's open to bringing accused gunman Brenton Tarrant back to Australia if he is convicted over the attack. As the complex investigation continues in New Zealand, European and Turkish intelligence services are retracing his extensive movements over the past 3 years and his links to several far-right organisations. Authorities in Turkey say they don't believe he was working alone.
A top-level Turkish delegation touches down in Christchurch. The country's Vice President and Foreign Minister meeting New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters, calling for a joint stance against all terror attacks. Back in Turkey, a powerful display of solidarity outside the famed Hagia Sophia in Istanbul. The attack has hit a nerve here in particular. Brenton Tarrant mentioned the historic site specifically in his 74-page manifesto. He visited Turkey twice in 2016. This CCTV image shows him at Istanbul's Ataturk International Airport. At a political rally, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan promised a thorough investigation, examining where he went and who he associated with while he was in the country.
He came to Istanbul for 3 days, then again for 40 days. Now, this is being examined to find out his connections, and we will find them out.
Tarrant's the only person charged over the attack, but Turkish intelligence officials don't believe a man of his limited means could pull off such a coordinated attack without help.
That kind of ordinary profile, who is not very well educated and also not rich, this person cannot commit such a violent action on his own. Turkish intelligence think there is a well-resourced organisation behind this act.
From 2016 to 2018, Tarrant also travelled extensively across Europe, focusing much of his time on the Balkans, where he visited historic battle sites. This is the hotel room he rented in Bulgaria, and the bed he slept in. Balkan nations are now trying to establish possible links to several far-right groups.
At the moment, security services are working on it. Until the attack, honestly, that person was not a focus of our institutions.
As that investigation gains speed, Pope Francis has joined the chorus of condemnation.
Sono vicino ai nostri fratelli musulmani e a tutta quella comunità e rinnovo l'invito a unirsi con la preghiera e i gesti di pace per contrastare l'odio e la violenza.
A message of unity as the world mourns with the people of New Zealand. Ben Terry, SBS World News.
And later in the program, we will examine the role of social media in propagating the gunman's hate-filled message. But for now, Darren, I'll leave you with the message of love and the support being offered by members of the Christchurch community here at the edge of the Botanic Gardens.
OK, thank you, Ricardo. Ricardo Gonçalves there in Christchurch. In other news, police are treating an attack on a teenager near London's Heathrow Airport as a terror incident carried out by a far-right extremist. A house in this street was searched after a 19-year-old man was attacked with a baseball bat and a knife. He was taken to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Witnesses heard an older man angrily shouting white supremacist slogans. He was arrested and charged with attempted murder. Police said the incident had all the hallmarks of a terror event. And a far-right Jewish politician has been disqualified from next month's Israel elections. The Supreme Court found Michael Ben-Ari of the Jewish Power Party had shown anti-Arab racism, a view backed by Israel's Attorney General. Other members of Jewish Power, which is in an alliance with the governing Likud party, remain eligible. The court also approved the candidacy of a disputed Arab party. Well, coming up next, how new data is showing similarities between the Ethiopian Airlines crash and the Lion Air crash last year. The struggle to dislodge the last remaining IS fighters in Syria. And the former president of Nauru, who has called for an end to asylum seeker processing in his nation. He talks exclusively with SBS World News.
Tonight at 7:30, witness personal scandal on looming nuclear war in the Kennedys. Then at 8:30, it's Michael Mosley. Trust me, I'm a doctor. And at 9:30, 24 hours in emergency.
I'm my own best friend. I like to have friends.
Overcoming loneliness.
I'm shy. I had no one to talk to. So what's life like now? I do these amazing things.
Then on Dateline.
I was feeling the bullet hitting the people beside me.
New Zealand's darkest day.
For quite a while now, New Zealand has failed to confront white supremacism.
Insight followed by Dateline. Tomorrow from 8:30 on SBS and On Demand. Our history is more colourful than you ever imagined. A post-war Australia sees new arrivals, a new independence, and the rise of a new enemy. Australia in Colour continues. Wednesday 8:30 on SBS and On Demand.
Plans for the holidays?
Oh, I'm starting my kitchen reno.
By yourself? Unsupervised?
I've seen the TV shows.
You can do better. With a Latitude personal loan, you could get someone to do up your kitchen. And with our Pay It Faster option, you could save up to $1,000 in interest just by paying an extra $50 a month.
Yeah, of course. I just really want to knock out a wall first.
Ask about our Pay It Faster option and see how you can do better with Latitude.
Kia's 7-day sale has been extended. Receive a $777 bonus across a wide range of Kia models. Plus, Australia's best 7-year warranty. Hurry, sale now ends March 24.
Sat-nav, Toyota warranty advantage. I'm still feeling it.
The Toyota value feeling stays with you. Get 2.9% finance across the 2018 RAV4 range. Search Toyota value. Oh, what a feeling. Toyota.
At Bingley, we've cooked up a surprise in the kitchen.
A bonus Bingley gift card on selected cooking appliances and dishwashers.
All this month, only at Bingley.
How did one group of filmmakers inspire hope in Britain's darkest hour?
You and me given opportunities, and to turn our back on those opportunities, wouldn't that be giving death dominion over life?
Their Finest, Friday 8:30 on SBS and On Demand.
You will love the Lord thy God with all your heart, or you will feel the pain of his judgment.
If you'd shown that girl 1 ounce of kindness, she would never have left.
No matter what, I'm not gonna stop.
I'm trying to keep you alive, you and our baby.
Is this what freedom looks like?
You want me to investigate flying saucers. I want you to help me prove to the public the truth.
Logic can't begin to explain what we're dealing with here.
They're watching us. Hey! I think there's something more going on now.
We're about to show you never saw. You understand?
The new series, Project Blue Book, starts Thursday 28th of March, only on SBS and On Demand.
SBS News anywhere, anytime. Download the app or go to sbsnews.com.au.
Rescuers are grappling with the devastation caused by twin disasters in separate parts of Indonesia. In Papua, flash flooding killed at least 75 people and many are still missing. Meanwhile, at the tourist hotspot of Lombok, at least 2 people are dead after an earthquake triggered landslides near a popular waterfall.
It's difficult to imagine a more urgent situation. Soldiers tried to soothe a 5-month-old baby who survived the collapse of his home. Moments earlier, he was pulled from the rubble. He's since been reunited with his father, but it's unclear what happened to his mother. The boy is one of the thousands displaced by flash floods and landslides caused by torrential rain in Papua, in Indonesia's east. Rescue workers are struggling to reach remote parts of the province.
Orders from the President include acceleration of evacuation, search and rescue of victims, for the deceased to be buried as quickly and as properly as possible, and the government would give compensation, and for the injured to be treated as well.
The major issue there is that it's a very remote area, and so it's very difficult to see the extent of the damage at this point.
Indonesia is still in its rainy season, and flooding is common at this time of year. But there are concerns deforestation has made the situation much worse. Further west, a similar story of chaos. Hundreds of flustered shoppers waited outside after being evacuated from a mall because of a 5.5 magnitude earthquake at Lombok.
Given that there was large-scale earthquakes in the middle of last year, it created quite a bit of panic. And also quite a bit of damage.
It triggered a landslide at the popular tourist destination. Dozens of tourists visiting a nearby waterfall were rescued and hundreds of homes were damaged. Jessica Washington, SBS World News.
Ethiopia's Transport Minister says data from the flight recorder of a Boeing aircraft that crashed a week ago shows clear similarities with an earlier disaster in Indonesia. The Ethiopian Airlines flight crashed shortly after takeoff, killing all 157 people on board.
Addis Ababa is a city in mourning. At a mass funeral, thousands gathered to remember the victims of the Ethiopian Airlines jet that crashed last Sunday. 17 caskets draped in the national flag, representing some of those who perished. With none of the bodies yet formally identified, each casket was empty. Not a single body has been found intact. Authorities say it could take up to 6 months for the remains to be examined. Some family members have been given charred earth from the crash site to help remember their loved ones.
His family is very much devastated because of his death. He was the pillar for his whole family. We have all lost a great human being.
For many, the pain is still raw, and some were overcome with grief, fainting at the service.
This is shocking and very saddening. Most of the people who perished in this accident were well-qualified professional Ethiopians and global citizens. It's very tragic and no one should go through this type of grief.
The black box from the doomed Flight 302, which killed all on board, is being examined by French authorities. Ethiopia's transport minister said initial analysis of the data shows there were clear similarities with the Lion Air crash off Indonesia less than 5 months ago, but she didn't go into details. Both planes were Boeing 737 MAX 8s, and pilots in both crashes reported flight control problems during takeoff.
If the Ethiopians know that there are parallels between these two crashes, speed is of the essence.
Concerns over the plane's safety has caused authorities around the world, including the US and Australia, to ground the entire fleet of MAX 8s.
These airplanes are not going to fly again until everybody, to include Boeing and the FAA, are satisfied that whatever occurred can never happen again.
While Boeing has repeatedly expressed confidence in its airline's safety, it's now working on a software update amid suspicions faulty sensors and software were to blame for the two crashes. Lydia Feng, SBS World News.
Back to the Christchurch attack now and its impact around the world. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has announced a multi-million-dollar move to toughen security at mosques, churches, synagogues and religious schools. Now, Mr Morrison says religious freedom begins with the right to worship and meeting safely without fear.
As police escort Sharon Tarrant from her home, this is the impact of her son's alleged massacre.
The community is in shock. Grieving, we're traumatized, we're feeling vulnerable, we're feeling unsafe. Our worshippers are nervous to come to mosque. First thing they're asking, what is the exit route?
Fear and anxiety the Prime Minister has again tried to ease.
Muslim Australians are us, Christian Australians are us, Jewish Australians are us, Hindu Australians are us, atheist or agnostic Australians are us. It's all us.
Scott Morrison confirming $55 million in grants to help safeguard religious schools, mosques, synagogues, temples and churches.
It grieves me that this is necessary, but sadly it is.
The money is good. We welcome the money. We're very pleased. At least something is happening. But that temporary measure is not a permanent solution. Vilification law needs to change, and the law needs to change now, today.
More than 1.2 million people signing a petition calling for Queensland Senator Fraser Anning to be expelled from Parliament.
People can be inflamed if they like, it's entirely up to them.
Mocking his altercation with a 17-year-old.
He got a slap across the face, which is what his mother should have given him long ago.
And impending bipartisan censure.
I don't know, I hope it's not too painful. What's Mr Morrison going to give me a flogging with his lace hanky or something like that, is it? I'm not sure.
Pauline Hanson.
They loathe this man. They loathe what he stands for. They loathe some of the things you stand for.
Whose party saw him elected with just 19 votes.
Did you pick this arsehole of a man because of his views, his white extremist views, or despite them?
No, I didn't.
Did you know what he believed in?
No.
Confirming she won't support the bipartisan condemnation.
I'm not going to vote.
Will you abstain?
Yes.
That's cowardly.
As the Greens call for Parliament to be given powers to ban poorly behaved colleagues.
Fraser Anning does not deserve a platform in our Parliament.
Frankly, some of these Greens are as bad as Fraser Anning on the far right.
Cabinet's National Security Committee today briefed on the growing threat of right-wing extremism as leaders warned Australians not to give the terrorists what they want.
The atrocity in Christchurch has nothing whatsoever to do with Muslim immigration and everything to do with irrational hatred.
Words matter. Words hurt. Words can cause hate.
More importantly, they can also unite.
We are all human beings. Your face is for you, my face is for me.
Honestly, I love this country a lot. From my deep of my heart, I love this country.
Brett Mason, SBS World News.
Well, the federal government has also flagged the possibility of regulating social media giants after criticism that companies didn't do enough to stop the spread of the live-streamed Christchurch attack. Videos of the massacre were viewed and shared online by millions around the world. Social media experts say companies need to learn from the incident.
For Sydney lawyer and devout Muslim Ahmed Dib, news of the terrorist attack in Christchurch was beyond comprehension.
It's absolutely heartbreaking when one considers that I take my son to the mosque.
But what's added to the horror of the attack on his community was seeing it on social media. The gunman live streamed the massacre online. It was shared and viewed globally by millions.
One can only think about seeing somebody murdered, but we saw a whole mosque and a group of people at a mosque massacred. Nobody wants that to be online.
Facebook has confirmed it's continuing to work around the clock to remove violating content. In the first day, 1.5 million videos of the terrorist attack were removed globally. Of those, 1.2 million were blocked at upload. While YouTube says it removed thousands of videos related to the incident, Twitter says it's continuously monitoring and removing any content that depicts the tragedy.
I would call on our social media platforms of all variety to demonstrate the kind of responsibility that both lead to these events and that includes those who perpetuate the messages in the aftermath. There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
New Zealand's Prime Minister isn't the only leader to criticise the social media giants. Here in Australia, federal politicians from both sides have blasted the companies for their roles in helping distribute the video. And experts say there are lessons from this incident.
These platforms didn't do enough to make sure that the video of the killing was taken down. And I think those criticisms are valid.
This type of terrorist events will add the urgency to the industry as an academia to find the right tools.
Some of New Zealand's biggest brands have vowed to pull advertising from the likes of Facebook and Google. And an 18-year-old has already been charged in New Zealand for sharing a video of the mosque shootings online. He was also charged with inciting extreme violence. The court heard he shared a photograph of the mosque with the caption "Target acquired" days before the attack.
It's disturbing. It should have been blocked immediately.
Ahmed Dib hopes faith and prayer will help the community get through this period.
All I can hope for is that as a people, not as just a Muslim community, but as a people as a whole, not from Australia, from New Zealand, that we rally behind these people to give them as much support as they need.
Pablo Vinales, SBS World News.
A prayer vigil is being held in Grafton this evening, the New South Wales hometown of the man accused with the killings. Church leaders organised the vigil at Grafton's Christchurch Cathedral in response to shock and grief, with many in their community struggling to come to terms with the attacks in New Zealand. All faiths were invited to attend. Now, local religious leaders say their hearts and prayers go out to the people in Christchurch, and they stand in solidarity to condemn all acts of terrorism. And a vigil is also being held in Melbourne this evening. Hundreds gathered at the State Library to remember and honour the victims of the mosque attacks. People from across Victoria were invited to attend the vigil organised by the state's Islamic Council. It says Victorian Muslims are shocked and saddened by the murderous attack on Muslims in New Zealand and are grieving the horrific loss of life. The council has welcomed statements of support and condemnation from political leaders. The Royal Commission into Aged Care has resumed, and today home carers looking after sick and elderly loved ones took the stand. Stay with us to find out their major concerns. That story shortly. A top US general has denied plans to keep up to 1,000 troops in Syria 3 months after President Donald Trump vowed to remove all US forces once IS was defeated. An estimated 5,000 militants and their families are thought to remain in the northeastern enclave of Baghouz. US-led Kurdish fighters admit that dislodging them is proving difficult.
The dream was of a glorious caliphate, This is what remains. A few squalid tents for IS fighters and their families. The humiliating remnants of a movement that once drew thousands worldwide. Here, an undetonated explosive. Everywhere, signs of the battle all but lost.
مضى المسافة تقريبا شيء 2 كيلو اللي مسيطرين عليها الدواعش.
People were seen still roaming the besieged encampment, and according to the last group departing, around 5,000 remain. The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces say some 1,300 militants have been killed, another 520 captured since the US-led campaign began in early January. But they admit the knockout blow isn't proving easy.
The big number of mines and explosive devices planted by ISIS and the existence of tunnels and hideouts used by ISIS beneath the ground that are using them to attack our forces or to defend themselves.
And at night, despite the rockets creating raging fires, the SDF said only around 100 militants and their families surrendered. On Friday, one group giving itself up was targeted by suicide bombers. The SDF has yet again vowed complete victory within a week. But what then? US President Trump has this year partially reversed his pledge to withdraw US forces from Syria amid warnings of IS regrouping. Joseph Dunford, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is now denying a report in the Wall Street Journal that as many as 1,000 troops may remain to support northern Kurds who face threats from Turkey. The UN is desperate to avoid being sidelined. Its special envoy again urging the formation of a committee to draft a new constitution followed by elections.
Hopefully that this could lead to a Syrian-led, Syrian-owned political process that could be facilitated by the United Nations.
But for the Assad regime, the idea of Syrian-led and owned includes the constitution. A sovereign issue, said the foreign minister, that should not be met with foreign interference. Rena Sarampayat, SBS World News.
An inquiry into the convictions of notorious child killer Kathleen Folbigg began in Sydney today. The judicial review was launched by the New South Wales Governor last year and will explore doubts over evidence that led to the guilty verdict.
Kathleen Folbigg has spent the last 16 years behind bars. Branded Australia's worst female serial killer, in 2003 she was found guilty of killing her 4 infant children. Patrick, Caleb, Sarah and Laura all died at different times, aged between 19 days and 19 months. Central to the Crown's case was the belief that there were no known reports of more than 2 children in the same family dying of natural causes. Today, an inquiry heard new evidence disputing the validity of that claim.
It is clear from the work of this inquiry that before 2003 there had been reported cases involving the deaths of 3 or 4 infants in the same family attributed to unidentified natural causes.
Experts in sudden infant death syndrome were the first witnesses to front the review. While they didn't rule out the possibility of multiple siblings dying of natural causes, both experts said all 4 babies were low risk of SIDS, in particular the youngest child, Laura, who was more than a year old when she died.
You know, there's 1 to 1.4 deaths per 100,000, so it's certainly very uncommon.
Kathleen Folbigg has elected to give evidence as part of the inquiry. She'll answer questions around her personal diary entries, which were used as key evidence in her trial. Among diary entries shared in today's opening remarks, Ms. Folbigg wrote of her daughter Sarah, "I know I was short-tempered and cruel sometimes to her, and she left, with a bit of help." In another, she wrote her youngest Laura is a fairly good-natured baby. Thank goodness. It has saved her from the fate of her siblings. I think she was warned. Laura died 15 months later. Ms. Folbigg watched on via video link in prison today and will have her chance to speak next month. Michelle Rimmer, SBS World News.
Well, home carers looking after sick and elderly loved ones have given emotional evidence at the Royal Commission into aged care quality and safety. Long waiting times for access to home care packages and high fees charged by service providers were some of the key issues addressed by the witnesses.
Raylene Ellis waited over a year for high-level home care funding for her ailing mother.
In the meantime, Mum's health was rapidly deteriorating. She lost significant amounts of weight at that point in time.
When it finally did come, she says the service provider charged 38% of their $50,000 annual allowance in admin fees for the equivalent of 9 hours per week of assistance.
Where's the money going? Because $50,000 should not translate to just 9 hours of care.
As the Royal Commission resumed in Adelaide, the focus turned to home care, the system that provides care and support to older people in their own homes. It's the model the majority of Australians prefer over living in a nursing home. But today the inquiry heard the system is plagued by long waits for funding, with almost 130,000 people waiting an average of 22 months to receive the right level of assistance.
To put that in perspective, there are more than twice as many people waiting for a level 4 package than are actually receiving one.
Linda Henderson is an informal carer for advanced dementia patient Vida Meneghetti. She told the Commission many carers sent under the home care system had no concept at all about dementia.
We badly need to look at a review of the national qualifications.
One of the key issues likely to be discussed in detail during this session of the Royal Commission is whether the home care sector receives enough funding. The inquiry heard today home care recipients account for about 67% of those in the aged care system, but that sector only receives about 27% of the funding. The inquiry will hear from frontline home care workers when it resumes tomorrow. Rhiannon Elston, SBS World News.
A former president of Nauru has called for the end of offshore refugee processing in his country as he awaits the result of his own asylum claim here in Australia. Sprent Dubwido agreed to reopen the detention centre with then Prime Minister Julia Gillard. Later, he fled to Australia and is now critically ill with just days or weeks to live. He spoke exclusively to SBS World News.
Even former presidents get nervous on their wedding day, particularly when the bride is late.
I feel so full of life and I feel so happy. Nobody can touch me.
This is the happiest day of Sprent Dubwido's life. It could also be one of his last. He has terminal cancer.
I have days or weeks to go. So I proposed to her at the cafeteria in the hospital, and she still said yes.
6 years ago, Mr. Dubwido was the one who said yes to a deal with the then Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard to reopen the Nauru Refugee Detention Centre in exchange for hundreds of millions of dollars in funding.
The Prime Minister has assured us that they won't be there forever.
Last year, he fled Nauru for Australia and is now seeking asylum, and the irony is not lost on him.
I never thought I'll be one of the person lining up to be an asylum seeker, especially when I'm the one who gave the go-ahead.
As an opposition MP, Mr. Dubwido has since fallen out with the current President Baron Wonga, alleging corruption and abuse of power.
With power comes corruption, and what's fueling power is the Australian money in the camps.
After protesting outside Parliament in 2015, he and others were charged with rioting, a case known as the Nauru 19. But a scathing court judgment cleared them and condemned the Nauru government for what it described as a shameful affront to the rule of law.
They've already categorised me as enemy of the state,
which is the basis of his asylum claim. Now in Australia getting cancer treatment unavailable in Nauru, he supports the Medivac bill for refugees.
Is it time for refugee processing to stop on Nauru?
It is, because it's hurting Nauru as much as it's hurting Australia. It's turned my island upside down.
He will never see his island home again, but now, with what days he has left, he's looking forward to married life.
It's the best day of my life.
Yes, same, feeling happy.
Facing death stoically, Sprent de Buido, former president of Nauru, is a man with regrets, but not a man defeated. Stefan Armbruster, SBS World News.
The finance figures now. When the Australian share market started the week higher, buoyed by iron ore producers as the price of the resource spiked. Fortescue metals rose nearly 5.5%. The big banks were mixed. The Australian dollar is buying a little over 71 US cents, and it's stronger across the other major global currencies. Well, coming up next, young and homeless. Why tens of thousands of young people need help to find somewhere to live. Also, roaring Rory McIlroy takes another step towards greatness at golf's 5th unofficial major.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute finance, thanks to La Trobe Financial. Make your money work harder for you.
Exercise snacking, detox diets, man flu, you name it.
You gotta stick to it in the name of science.
Have you ever read a headline and thought, is that really true? Well, join Michael Mosley and his team as they cut through the hype to give you a definitive answer behind these bizarre health trends. You may be surprised at what you find.
Absolutely, completely new.
That's what I absolutely love. We do these things and we have absolutely no idea how it's going to turn out.
A brand new series of Trust Me, I'm a Doctor, tonight 8:30 on SBS and On Demand. How did one group of filmmakers inspire hope in Britain's darkest hour?
You and me given opportunities, and to turn our back on those opportunities, wouldn't that be giving death dominion over life?
Their Finest, Friday 8:30 on SBS and On Demand.
What do you think it was that made the two of you so different?
This is not going to end well.
Do you want to proceed?
We know you've always worked hard for your money. In these uncertain economic times, who do you trust to protect your wealth? Invest with La Trobe Financial, Australia's multi-award-winning wealth manager and leading credit specialist. Trusted by Australians for more than 60 years.
You name it, we cover it. Fistball, badminton, bodybuilding, roller derby, the competitiveness, the spirit. Starting a new business on my own, it was certainly nerve-wracking. So with Vodafone, having a personal account manager who understands who we are, what we do, is significant. I need a team player, not just a telco.
The Australian Government is investing in transport infrastructure as part of a 10-year, $75 billion commitment to support our nation. Right across New South Wales, the Australian Government is making significant investments in hundreds of projects to deliver faster, safer connections. To learn more about this Australian Government-funded commitment and see projects happening close to you, visit the website. Search Building Our Future. Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
I lied. I stole. And worse. I didn't want that for you.
Placing our agent undercover, she'll look right enough next to our guy.
Do you love me? You know I do. You chose to play cops and robbers, and you lost. You can be better than me.
Do you remember what your first ever memory was?
Oh, God. The secret recordings that shocked the palace. I felt I was a lamb to the slaughter. Revealing the life beyond the tabloids. I was excluded totally in that day. Of the people's princess. The fact is, I'm not a political figure. Both at home and in the public eye. I suddenly realised what I was going to lose if I let go. Diana, in her own words. Sunday 8:40 on SBS and On Demand.
State and federal governments are failing young homeless people, according to the National Youth Homelessness Conference held in Melbourne today. The conference heard the numbers of those sleeping rough has grown substantially over the last decade, with early intervention programs remaining critically underfunded.
On the steps of Melbourne's iconic Flinders Street station, this is one of the places Liam Van Breda slept when he left home as a teenager.
Well, you know what? This is safer than getting bashed every day, so yeah.
He spent 6 years sleeping rough. Losing hope, he turned to drugs.
I swear 100,000 people wouldn't even know I existed. Wouldn't even know I'm sitting on the side of that street. Yeah, people just walk by. It's so degrading.
In 2008, the federal government aimed to halve homelessness by 2020, but a decade later, it's increased.
I really think we've neglected 3 generations of young Australians, and we're now reaping the whirlwind.
Prior to 2008, the number of young people seeking specialist homelessness services was 32,000 annually. Today, it's 42,000. The National Children's Commissioner wants a bipartisan election promise for urgent intervention.
The future of our children should be everybody's business, and all government should step up to address this worsening issue.
The National Report Card on Youth Homelessness shows little progress on issues like affordable housing for young people, early intervention for at-risk young people, and support for those after intervention.
All of the drivers of youth homelessness have increased over that period of time, and although there's been some initiatives and some advances made, we're not winning.
On any given night, 115,000 Australians are homeless. A quarter of those are aged between 12 and 24 years. Advocates say the best chance of reducing this figure is early intervention, giving support to those at risk of homelessness before it happens.
We know who they are, we know what to do, we're just not doing enough of it.
It could have helped Yuin woman Tiana Parkinson. A ward of the state from 4 years old. At 18, she was left to fend for herself.
I just was thrown into the deep end and had to kind of look for private rentals myself, but I didn't know much about anything.
She dreams of becoming a musician and reconnecting with her Indigenous roots. But first, she needs a stable home.
You have so much that you want to do, but because of your instability, you're unable to continue achieving goals that you want to achieve.
Abby Dinham, SBS World News.
Time now for the day in sport with Lucy Zelich. And Luce, the Wallabies will prepare for the World Cup on home soil.
That's right, Darren. Nice to see you. Good evening. Australia's men's rugby team will play host to Manu Samoa in their final match before the World Cup in Japan. It will be the first test to be played at the new Western Sydney Stadium, and it's an occasion that Israel Folau expects will help grow the game.
Scott Sio was a week old and Alan Alalatoa wasn't even born when their fathers helped Manu Samoa reach the quarterfinals of the Rugby World Cup in 1991. On September the 7th, they are both set to line up for Australia against the Pacific Island nation at the new Western Sydney Stadium.
I guess we're sort of carrying on a bit of that lineage, but in our own sort of pathway and our own journey with the Wallabies. So hopefully I'll get the opportunity to be a part of that, and it'll be a pretty exciting week.
I think the whole vibe around that game come September is going to be exciting, and you know, whether I play or not, I'm sure the whole family will be out there watching that game.
Like Seo and Alalatoa, Israel Folau grew up in Western Sydney.
It'll be a packed out stadium, no doubt. There'll be plenty of Samoans and just Pacific Islanders in general who will turn up to watch the game and support it.
Folau says it's an occasion that should occur regularly.
I'd love to play against nations like Samoa and Tonga more often.
The match is exactly 2 weeks before Australia's opening World Cup game against Fiji. Runners-up in 2015, the Wallabies are confident they can defy expectations.
For us to experience that in that last World Cup, being in the pool of death, with a lot of those players have got that experience now and aware that anything can happen in any given game.
We know how good we can be, so we're keeping our expectations high and our standards high in and around our team.
Adrian Archuli, SBS World News.
Still with rugby, and the Crusaders will consider changing their name following the terror attacks on 2 mosques in Christchurch on Friday. Officials confirmed in a statement that they acknowledge concerns have been raised about the club's name. The Crusaders were one of 5 teams to be formed in New Zealand when Super Rugby started in 1996. They remain the most successful side in the history of the competition, winning 9 titles. Socceroos goalkeeper Matty Ryan has helped Brighton reach the semi-finals of the FA Cup for, how about this, the first time since 1983. The Seagulls scored 2 late goals to force extra time against Championship side Millwall. The Premier League outfit won the penalty shootout 5-4 and will face Manchester City for a spot in the final. Meantime, Sydney FC's hopes of catching A-League leaders Perth suffered a huge blow last night. The Sky Blues were beaten 2-0 by Melbourne City. They now sit 9 points behind the Glory with 5 rounds to play. The AFL's new runner rules has left coaches frustrated on the eve of the new season. The new guidelines state runners can only be on the field for 45 seconds after a goal has been kicked. The AFL has come under pressure to change the rule and provide more clarity to clubs.
Well, personally, I'd like the runner to stay. I understand it's not going to, and in what form that looks like. We haven't received anything from the AFL other than the rule as it stands, which is no runner until a goal's kicked.
The new season begins on Thursday night with Carlton taking on Richmond at the MCG. Dragons star James Graham believes the NRL is doing a good job protecting players from suffering long-term head injuries. Rugby league great Andrew Johns claims head knocks suffered during his career may have contributed to him being diagnosed with epilepsy. Graham says players are aware of the risks.
Like, what's the alternative? Do you know what I mean? It's a tough one, you know. Like, what are you supposed to do? Just stop playing sport, I guess. I don't know. Like, yeah, where would my life be without rugby league?
The Dragons will look to bounce back from their round 1 loss to the Cowboys when they take on the Rabbitohs on Thursday night. To tennis, and unheralded Canadian teenager Bianca Andreescu has pulled off a massive upset at Indian Wells. The 18-year-old defeated 3-time Grand Slam champion and world number 8 Angelique Kerber in the decider. Her victory over 3 sets is the first time a wildcard entrant has secured the WTA event. Andreescu is also the second youngest woman to win the title.
It wasn't an easy match. Angelique was getting to a lot of balls, and I'm just really grateful that I managed physically and mentally.
The Canadian is expected to rise to number 24 in the WTA Tour rankings after starting the year at 152. Meantime, there was also an upset in the men's final. Dominic Thiem overpowered Roger Federer to claim the biggest title of his career. The Austrian 7th seed dropped the first set at Indian Wells. However, he found his rhythm to secure his first win over the 20-time Grand Slam champion on a hard court. It was Thiem's 12th ATP crown. To golf, and Rory McIlroy has emerged as the last man standing in a wild final round to win the Players' Championship. McIlroy overcame an early double bogey to card a 2-under par 70 in a fluctuating breeze at TPC Sawgrass. His one-shot victory over American Jim Furyk makes him the first player from Northern Ireland to secure golf's 5th unofficial major. The 29-year-old says he doesn't intend on retiring anytime soon.
I've been on tour 10 years, more 11 years, and I learned a lot in those 10, 11 years, and I feel like I can make the next 10 years even better than the previous 10 years. So that's what my motivation is.
A victory for McIlroy at next month's Masters will complete the Grand Slam of all 4 majors. Jason Day was the best-placed Australian, tied for 8th. And finally in sport, Team Sky's Egan Bernal has taken out the Paris-Nice title after holding off a challenge from Nairo Quintana. The 22-year-old crossed the line just behind his fellow Colombian to take overall honours by 39 seconds. Great achievement indeed. And Darren, that's the day in sport.
Thanks very much, Liz. Well, coming up next, the weather and Australia's art world farewells a tireless champion.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute sport, thanks to Hyundai Kona. Way more fun than your car.
Next, witness personal scandal on looming nuclear war in the Kennedys. Then at 8:30, it's Michael Mosley. Trust me, I'm a doctor. And at 9:30, 24 hours in emergency.
I'm my own best friend. I like to have friends.
Overcoming loneliness.
I'm shy. I had no one to talk to. So what's life like now? I do these amazing things.
Then on Dateline.
I was feeling the bullet hitting the people beside me.
New Zealand's darkest day.
For
quite a while now, New Zealand has failed to confront white supremacism.
Insight followed by Dateline, tomorrow from 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
I was made by early starts. By the dedication of my family. Made by pushing myself and never giving up.
Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Made to inspire the next generation of the Socceroos. I was made in the Hyundai A-League.
We know you've always worked hard for your money. In these uncertain economic times, who do you trust to protect your wealth? Invest with La Trobe Financial, Australia's multi-award-winning wealth manager and leading credit specialist. Trusted by Australians for more than 60 years.
As Finance Minister, Michael Daly racked up billions in debt and deficit. Now he wants to be Premier. That would mean higher taxes for you, more congestion for you, and more pressure on you and your family. Don't risk Labor, or you'll pay for it daily.
Authorised by Chris Stone, Liberal Party of Australia, New South Wales Division, Sydney.
Going on a holiday with the whole family. Got a lot of packing to do. Get everybody ready. You'll need a big room to fit everyone. And I mean everyone. You might want to eat in every once in a while. Get a pool, you know, for the kids. And for a great price, of course. Easy. Just go to Trivago. Select your destination, dates and filters. Trivago makes it easy to compare prices from different websites so you can find the ideal hotel for you. Hotel Trivago.
Our history is more colourful than you ever imagined. A post-war Australia sees new arrivals, a new independence, and the rise of a new enemy. Australia in Colour continues. Wednesday 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
Sam.
My ovaries just tried to move back to Canada. Stop. You can tell I'm from the future because my blazer is metallic.
Full Frontal with Samantha B, Thursday 9:30 on SBS Viceland and on demand.
Far North Queensland is bracing for tropical cyclone Trevor, with the storm expected to hit as a Category 3 system tomorrow night. It's forecast to make landfall near the community of Lockhart River on Cape York Peninsula. Trevor may weaken before entering the Gulf of Carpentaria later on Wednesday, where it will re-intensify. Now, the system is predicted to bring destructive winds with gusts over 125 kilometres per hour. Heavy rainfall could also cause flash flooding. To the weather now, and Tropical Cyclone Trevor is dominating the satellite map tonight. A trough in the east will bring showers to New South Wales. Another trough over Western Australia will also cause showers and storms, mainly in the north and the west. In the major centres, showers in Sydney, Brisbane, Hobart and Canberra. A possible storm in Darwin. Sunny in Adelaide, cloudy for Melbourne and Perth. Looking further afield, partly cloudy for Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. Thunderstorms for Nadi, some rain in Tahiti. In Southeast Asia, showers for Port Moresby and Honiara, partly cloudy for Bangkok and thunderstorms for Kuala Lumpur, fine in Singapore. Further north, rain in Hanoi, a cloudy day across Beijing, Manila, Seoul, Shanghai and Tokyo. Heading west, fine in Baghdad and Beirut, thunderstorms for Delhi and rain in Islamabad, fine for Jerusalem. Up to Europe, fine in Madrid and Athens, rain for Rome and Belgrade, cloudy in London, Istanbul and Berlin. In Africa, thunderstorms on the forecast for Johannesburg and Lagos, fine in Cairo, Casablanca and Dakar, fine in Addis Ababa. To South America, some drizzle in Rio de Janeiro, showers for Caracas and Lima, rain in Bogota and La Paz, cloudy in Santiago. And finally, North America, showers in Miami and Washington, fine in New York, Chicago and Dallas, cloudy in Denver. Well, the former director of the New South Wales Art Gallery, Edmund Capon, has died in England after battling cancer. He was 78. The internationally trained art historian and curator leaves a legacy of significant contributions to visual arts in Australia. He led the gallery for more than 3 decades, doubling attendance, establishing an acquisitions fund and curating many major exhibitions. Paying tribute, Arts Minister Mitch Fifield said Edmund Capon has left a lasting impression on Australia's cultural landscape. Recapping our top stories now, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the Christchurch massacre has exposed a weakness in New Zealand's gun laws and new reforms to be announced in 10 days. A major gun retailer has confirmed it sold 4 weapons to the man accused of the attack. More than 1,000 students gathered at a park in Christchurch in a touching tribute to the lives lost in the attack. The black box from the Ethiopian Airlines disaster suggests clear similarities with the Lion Air crash last October. The Ethiopian Airlines flight crashed shortly after takeoff, killing all 157 people on board. A national report card on youth homelessness reveals the number of people sleeping rough has grown substantially over the last decade. That's the world this Monday. We'll have news updates throughout the evening on SBS and another bulletin at 10:30 tonight. The SBS News website has all the up-to-date stories, and get news anywhere, anytime with the SBS News app. From the team, I'm Darren Mara. Good night.